Today, Sigma announced a new lens, the 35mm f1.4 DG-DN Art for L and E mounts. I've been lucky to have been using it for about a week in the L mount version, and today I'm excited to share with you my thoughts and the photos and videos that I captured with this lens on my Leica SL2. In case you're new here, hello, my name is Leigh. I share videos every week on anything where you might have a camera in your hand. Sometimes it's gear reviews, sometimes it's all about inspiration, sometimes it's simply using the gear and showing you my results. Subscribe if that sounds interesting to you. But for now, let's look at some photos and video, and then I will discuss my experience with this lens and how I think it fits into today's photo gear landscape. Well, of course it's a phenomenal lens. I've come to expect nothing less these days, especially from Sigma's Art line of lenses, which is all about uncompromising quality. We're talking edge-to-edge sharpness and robust, weather-sealed build quality. I will get back to build quality in a minute, but these art lenses are for those of you that love to pixel peep into those corners, even when shooting wide open. And when we're talking about the prime lenses in the art line, these are for those of you that really like those wide apertures. The DG-DN notations mean that this is a full frame lens, although you can, of course, still use it on an APS-C body. I actually shifted the SL2 over to APS-C for a bit of video from time to time. In that case, your effective focal length becomes 52.5 millimeters. And last, the DN portion means that the lens was designed for mirrorless cameras. Generally, that allows the lens to be more compact, which this lens certainly is, especially for an f1.4 lens, and also quiet or even silent while autofocusing, which again, this lens is. So if you really like to be stealthy with your photography or you like to shoot video, you won't hear this lens as it focuses. Getting back to the lens itself for just a moment. The prime lenses in the art line have an aperture ring that you can choose to click into place or to have turn smoothly. You can lock yourself into or out of the discrete apertures. There's a programmable button on the lens. I have mine set to switch between full frame and APS-C. Especially when I'm using a prime lens on a high megapixel camera like the SL2, it's like having an additional lens with you. But depending on your camera, you can program it for a whole number of different functions. Another smart thing about this lens is the wide and well-damped focus ring. This lens opening up to f1.4 and having a very close focusing distance of under a foot means that you can achieve a very shallow depth of field. And sometimes when I want to be extra sure that that sliver of in focus area is exactly where I want it, I switch over to manual focus, and it's nice to have a focus ring that is easy to grab hold of and not be too loose so that I can be precise. Okay, at this point you may be saying to yourself, well, Leigh, that's great and all, but do we really need another 35mm lens option? And I'm glad you asked. First of all, I am never going to complain about having more options. The point where we are, where the camera and lens manufacturers are, at least with lenses, is that they are fine-tuning and filling out their lineups. What that means for us consumers is that we can pick and choose the right combination of lenses that we want in our camera bags. Here's what I mean. My L-mount collection of lenses is varied. I have some Sigma contemporary lenses, a Sigma art lens, a big Leica lens, a Panasonic lens. I don't feel the need to have all Leica lenses or all Sigma art lenses. I want different options for different situations. I want to pick and choose which cameras and lenses I'm going to pack in my bag for each outing. Because one day I might be hiking big miles in the desert, but the next I might be headed to my local museum for some art and camera therapy, or doing astrophotography in the middle of the forest, or photographing my new nephew, or filming myself for videos here in the studio. And there is certainly no one right lens for each of those situations, but I do enjoy the process of choosing something that feels right on that day. And it leads me to then more enjoyment in my work. I've said this before, but if there is anything I have learned in my more than a decade of making videos here on YouTube, it is that everyone wants something a little different. No one lens or camera will please everyone. That being the case, we are lucky to have a number of options in the 35mm prime lens category, ranging from f1.2 to f2.8. I'll put some options and their prices up on the screen right now. You'll see the price of this new art lens there as well. There are other Sigma 35mm lenses for both L and E mount. Leica has one for L mount. Sony has several options for their E mount. Tamron has one for E mount. It's up to you to determine which one fits your style and your budget, but I can say that this lens is an option that I wouldn't think twice about. It's wonderful. Now, I did use Sigma's 35mm f1.2 DGDN art lens last year. It was phenomenal, but the size and weight held me back from making a purchase. I do have the 35mm f2 DGDN contemporary lens, which is much smaller than both the f1.2 and f1.4 art lenses. So when would I pick up this art lens over the contemporary lens? Let's talk through that. Is there a huge difference between f2 and f1.4? No. However, it is a full stop, and that relatively small difference actually has a large impact when the light is very low. Every bit of ISO sensitivity that you can dial back can be beneficial at higher ISO sensitivities, especially when using a high megapixel camera like the SL2. You naturally end up with more noise with those smaller pixels. And I have used the 35mm f2 contemporary in low light environments. f2 is still a wide aperture, so like I said, I can't tell you what 35mm lens would be right for you. We all have different needs and budgets, but here's my thought process on if I want this lens or not. So I already mentioned Sigma's 35mm f1.2 art lens. I loved that lens, but I don't think I would use it very often because it's a bit bulky and heavy for what I think I would use it for. This f1.4 lens is significantly more compact. I would personally trade the extra aperture for the smaller lens, at least at this focal length. But what about the 35mm f2 contemporary lens that I already have? It's a lot smaller, but it trades a full stop, and it won't have quite the clarity across the frame as the art lenses. I suspect that for me, the contemporary lens would get more use. It's simply easier to toss into my bag, and the image quality is still stellar. But here's the thing. There are certain pieces of gear that come through here that I think about after it's gone. I know this lens is going to be one of those things. I appreciate the image quality, I appreciate the wider aperture, and I really appreciate the build quality. These art lenses fit extremely well with my Leica SL2, meaning that they're just very well made. What do you think? 35mm is a super popular focal length. Do you already have it, either as a prime lens, or do you use 35mm a lot on a zoom lens? I'd love to hear from you about why you use what you use, and if this lens tempts you like it tempts me. Let me know in the comments. This lens will be available mid-May, so we have a little bit of time to think about it. On your way down to those comments, please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I will also put information in the description to my full courses if you want to learn more from me in terms of basics of photography and technique for different types of photography. Thank you to Sigma for trusting me with this lens, and thank you for watching.